Yeah.
What's it like getting into a local comedy scene, at least in Pittsburgh?
Well, I'll answer the clicky part first, just because I have always compared it to with music scenes, because I went to film school and that's where I started stand up, and I would record a lot of music videos for rappers, and I would start doing stand up shows with the music shows to like try stand up, and that's where I got to see how clicky music was. But I think what separates stand up from being more clicky than music is at the end of the day, a lot of musicians need the other musician for like a studio or for a feature or for a friend that they have, when a lot of stand-up is just you showing up to the show and reaching out to the booker. So I feel like they cut that fake fat niceness, because you don't need a lot of those other outside sources.
That's very fucking interesting. I never thought about that. Yeah.
And I think that's why it's more of a lone wolf thing. But with music, you can't really like burn that many bridges. But with stand-up, there's a lot of people. There was a comedy club called Burning Bridges in Pittsburgh, which is sick. But yeah, it's one of those things where you can't burn that many bridges. But in stand-up, there's a lot of guys that burn bridges, but funny's funny, and they'll book you if you can bring it out. But with music, it's different. But in the scene, I would say it's like this, because I started stand-up 6 years ago in Florida when I went to film school, and no one knew me. It was awesome because I got to like eat a bag of dicks for like 3 years. And then 3 years ago, I came back to Pittsburgh, and that's when I started doing it here. And I was lucky enough to have like a solid 5 minutes to where whenever I'd go to an open mic, I was new, but I was also funny. So it was very like clicky. People didn't talk to me, but as soon as you are like at a good open mic and you have a few good jokes and someone's like, hey, you're funny, and you get introduced to someone else, I feel like that's when the change starts happening. I feel like that's with everything though. Like when you play in a sports team, you take a good shot. They're like, hey, what's up, man? You want to go out with the team after? It's just one of those things where you kind of have to prove yourself, because there's just so much of it,
Yeah.
But it's hard at first because your ego will get shattered. Like, for example, I had Derek Minto on. I don't know if you know who he is.
Yeah, he's been on my show too.
Derek's awesome. But my first encounter with Derek, so when I first moved back to Pittsburgh, I really didn't have a place to stay. I was staying with Danielle's mom because I just wanted to get out of Florida, and I wanted to start comedy here. And I was staying at like with her mom, and then I would stay up Slippery Rock with her on the weekends. And so it was just hard to come down for open mics because I'm staying up Slippery Rock, and I wasn't really going that much. And then I saw there was a Pittsburgh comedy competition, and I applied, didn't hear anything. And then like randomly on a Friday, they said, the competition's tonight. Someone dropped out. Do you want to go in? I was like, fuck yeah. So I did the competition, and the hosts were like a couple local comics, and I did well. I placed third. It was a couple different positions, but it was within like 30 people. So it was cool. And from that, in the green rooms, I got to like meet more comics, and they're like, oh, you should come to Hambones. Oh, you should go to Papa D's. Like kind of going through there. So it gave me some confidence. And like a week later, I go to Hambones, and it's a Monday night, and it's like Derek and all of like the comics in the scene that are like doing it, that have shows to where you just don't want to look like a schmuck in front of them. And I walked in, and I like go to sign up, and Derek just turns around, and Derek, he has a big voice. Mm-hmm. And he's just like, oh, look, it's the kid that only does competitions. And dude, when I tell you my dick turtle shelled into my body, like Hambones is small already, dude. Uh-huh. And like everyone in the room just like looks, and that's your first impression. Like that's what you're thinking. You're talking clicky, like competition kid. And I'm just like, and the reason why I hurt is like, he's not wrong. I wasn't going to mics, and I did do a competition, and I think that's why it hurt the most. And I was like, fuck you in the moment. And like one of the guys that was hosting the competition, John Dick Winters, was there, and he was just like, no, man, he's a cool kid. And I signed up on the list. And from that night on, once I started coming out to the mics and I booked more, me and Derek, we laughed about it because it was a really funny thing. But he was like, yeah, man, it's one of those things in comedy. Like, you had a young face, you did a competition, you're walking in all confident. He's like, I just wanted to put you down a peg.
Yeah.
But I honestly kind of needed it because it really did. That like that's something in Florida that I had a lot to where like my first open mic went horrible. And as a joke on stage, I was like, well, I guess I'm going to go kill myself after this. And like a guy in the bar goes, you definitely should. And like, dude, I'm just sitting in my car crying as like a 19-year-old, like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, what are you doing? And then to have that as like my first moment back in Hambones. But I think it showed that I liked what I was doing and I wanted to do it because I kept coming back and it went well. But it's just one of those things where it happens all the time. And that's where the name of the podcast, The Babyface Assassin, like with starting comedy young and with hanging out with older people all the time, it would just always be that thing where it would be the babyface so they judge. And I would just have to kind of like assassinate all that bullshit to make it through like into all that shit. And it just keeps following me. But it ends up making like some of the best friendships because you kind of do break that bullshit.
You know, I think that makes a lot of sense. And you've been able to articulate that in a much better way than anybody else I've ever asked that question to. And maybe it is just because like you're like still relatively young compared to other people I've talked to about this. Cause like I've had people like John Dick Winters has been on the show, and Derek Minto's been on the show, and Dave Bracey's been on the show. And like all of those people have already been doing comedy for like well over a decade at the time when I talked to them. So like they don't give a shit about answering questions like that.
Yeah.
But like I totally get where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And I almost wish there was some of that in the local music scene. It's kind of like they give a shit about making sure the talent is worthy of the stage time. Whereas in local music scenes, everybody's kind of that fake nice to each other because everybody, like you said so eloquently, everybody in the music scene does sometimes need something from somebody else. Cause like people in the music scene, especially in Pittsburgh, are all very nice to each other and they'll go out of their way to help each other, which is great. Yeah. But if at the end of the day, you have mediocre shows because the talent is just not curated accordingly, then you're not going to be able to build a scene of genuine fans. Because when you get people out to a show, it'd be like, you know, if you curate a comedy show with a bunch of whatever comedians and you invite everybody that you know out and you're like, this is my representation of local comedy. You don't want to do that, right? Like you want it to be the best that you can. So all of the people are like, you know, you're giving the crowd a good show that they want to tell their friends about and come back to. Yeah. That doesn't happen in the local music scene as much.
Yeah. It's a weird middle ground. I feel like it's starting to get a little bit better, but it's so, I don't know.
But you got to give people chances too and give people that time to grow. Like as a stand-up comedian, I feel like you need to have stage time outside of like open mic nights to like grow and get validation and introduce yourself to the actual community. And that's the same thing with bands. But I don't know. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, dude.
No. I was just saying exactly what you were saying with the music thing. But I don't know, because right now, that's another thing where I really wanted to, I've always liked music. And I would always mess around, but I never saw myself as like an artist where like singing or rapping, but I've always messed around with beats and stuff. But I really, once I found out about like Rick Rubin, to where he really was like a curator in a room where he would like curate a playlist. And even recently with Brockhampton's new album, like they played him the first 3 songs and he was like, if you change that order, you were doing yourself a disservice. And little things like that. And even growing up, I would listen to music and I would set up my own playlist on iTunes of how I'd want the album to go of an album and stuff. Sure. And I just kept putting myself in a box where like, I'm meeting these musicians, I'm getting these resources, I'm doing an all art show. And I was like, I would love to put together like how Tree J would do those 420 tapes. Like every 420, Tree J from Most Dope, he would get like Mac Miller, Hardo, all these local producers to do these 420 tapes where like, dude, you're hearing Hardo and Mac on a song when they usually went in a line because like with the music thing, you have to reach a status, and it brought a lot of Pittsburgh artists together. And I was like, I have these resources, but I didn't want to jump in the music scene because I just like, I was putting myself in a box. But then people like Donald Glover who like did stand up and then jumped into music, I feel like it's all emotions. And like, as long as you're genuine and you have like a real drive to it, people can sniff that out. So why not try it? And with people in the music scene being so nice, like I started to put together like a Babyface tape that I'm dropping on Christmas for my birthday. And it's so cool because like 2 artists now, I rented the studio time. They came, offered them money. They said no, did the verse for free, shout out the song. And then today a kid hit me up. He's like, come down to ID Labs. I'll record it with you. We'll do this song. His friend texts me. He's like, hey, who all do you want on the list? I have some producers that can send you beats. People are just sending beats for free and it's naturally happening. And I was like, well, if I wouldn't have ever asked or just put myself out there, and it shows the niceness of the music scene to where it could be good, where something like you want to make something, but also in the other sense, I'm like, well, fuck, I need to see who exactly, and the people that have hit me up are my genuine friends, but I just need to see who exactly hits up after, because then with all art, I'm just doing this for myself because I just want to create my own playlist. And then I've already had people hit me up who are like, dude, we should do like these ciphers. We should do these things with it. And I'm like, no, I'm not trying to get in the music scene like that. Like if I would drop one of these tapes once a year, that's my goal, just to dip into the music scene. But meeting people like you, who your podcast kind of talks to everyone, it's been a huge blessing because I've had this idea for like 2 years. And now like 2 songs are recording on it. And it's really a tribute to like you guys who have always just kind of like, I'm going to interview whoever the fuck, why would I? And that non-give a shit where I'm like, fuck dude, giving a shit is literally just is what's stopping me most of the time, you know?
Yeah.